My name is Megan Whitmore. I'm 23 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything I was born into, and how I rebuilt something even stronger in its place. It was a gray October morning in Hilford, Vermont, the kind where the cold mist clings to your skin like a secret you can't shake off. I was sitting in our cramped kitchen, stirring a chipped ceramic mug of instant coffee, when my son Liam burst in holding a painting he'd made. "Mom, look. The dog from the park." I painted his eyes sad. The watercolor bled with emotion. Autumn leaves scattered, a lonely beagle curled under a tree. I crouched down and ruffled his soft brown hair. "You're amazing, Liam. You saw his sadness. That's something special." He grinned, a gap in his baby teeth showing, then ran off to grab his backpack. I watched him go, my heart aching with something that felt like pride and pain woven into one. At 5 years old, Liam had more emotional insight than most adults I knew, especially the ones who used to call themselves my family. The irony never left me. Just across the square stood the Whitmore Gallery, once the crown jewel of my parents' reputation. The building still bore our family name in bold brass letters, though it had long since faded into quiet disuse. Some said it was out of respect. Others whispered it was shame. Either way, it stood as a frozen monument to everything they chose over me. My parents, Richard and Amelia Whitmore, were Hilford's elite. Old money, clean scandals, charity galas, wine tastings, and annual museum donor plaques. They lived like royalty in a kingdom of art and status. And I was supposed to be their masterpiece. But I wanted to be an artist instead. Not the kind who negotiates auctions or analyzes brushstrokes for investment value. I painted because it was the only way I could make sense of the world. I wanted to study fine arts, even won local awards in high school, but when I handed in my application for the Vermont School of the Arts, my mother folded it neatly and set it aside with her coffee. "Painting is a nice hobby, Megan, but it won't feed you. It's time to stop playing." So I stopped asking. But I never stopped painting. Then came Leo. He was a year older, president of the high school art club, and had the kind of quiet eyes that made you believe he saw things others missed. For the first time, someone didn't just tolerate my passion. He shared it. We'd stay after school to sketch together, talk about our futures like we could build one just by dreaming hard enough. I clung to those afternoons like air, until the test came back positive. 2 red lines, then 2 more. I took 3 tests total because hope is stubborn like that. But all 3 confirmed what I already knew deep down. I was 18, pregnant, and terrified. I remember the day I told them like it was branded into my bones. My mother was slicing apples in the kitchen. My father was reading the latest issue of Art Collector's Digest in his study. I walked in, heart hammering, the test stick a cold weight in my pocket. "Mom," I said, "I need to talk to you. It's serious." She didn't look up. "If it's about applying to art school again, Megan, I'm out of patience." Took a breath. "I'm pregnant." The knife slipped from her hand and hit the counter with a clatter that felt louder than a scream. She stared at me like I'd suddenly turned to dust. My father stepped in. "What?" His voice was low. "You're joking." "I'm not. It's Leo's. I'm keeping it." That was when something shifted in the air. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was worse. A coldness, a retreat behind invisible walls. My mother stood up slowly, wiped her hands and said, "Then you are no longer a daughter of this house." No shouting. No tears. Just that. I had 24 hours to leave. They gave me no money, no help. Not even a blanket. I scraped together what I could, including a few bills from my little brother's piggy bank, and left the Whitmore estate like a criminal sneaking away in shame. I called Leo that night from a park bench behind the high school. It was cold and I was shaking. All I needed was to hear him say we'd get through this together. "Megan," he answered groggily. "You're calling late. I'm pregnant. It's yours." Silence. Then, "Are you sure?" "Yes. 3 tests." Another pause. "Megan, I can't. I got a scholarship to Parsons. I'm leaving for New York in a few weeks." My voice cracked. "And what about me? About the baby?" "You'll be okay. You're strong." "I'm sorry." Then he hung up. And I sat there in the freezing dark, abandoned by the only two people I thought would love me no matter what. That night, I slept under the old wooden awning behind the bakery. The same bakery where I would later wash dishes just to buy diapers. By morning, my legs were numb, and my eyes were swollen from crying. I stumbled into school not to learn, but because I didn't know where else to go. That's when Miss Lorraine Durain, my high school art teacher, found me sitting on the steps. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "Megan, sweetheart. What happened?" I told her everything. She listened. No judgment. No lectures. "You're not alone," she said. "You can stay at my cottage. We'll figure this out together." That night, for the first time since my world fell apart, I slept in a real bed. In a tiny room behind her garden, with peeling wallpaper and a desk barely big enough for a sketchpad. But it was warm. And it was mine. Miss Lorraine didn't treat me like a broken thing. She gave me chores, made me promise to keep studying, and let me paint every day after dinner. We'd talk late into the night about color theory, emotion in brushstrokes, and the stories art could tell when words failed. I started showing again at 5 months, and by then, the whispers at school were relentless. But I stayed, kept painting, kept studying, because I had someone depending on me now. And I wasn't going to fail him. By graduation I was huge. My gown barely zipped. But I walked that stage with my head high, my heart full of quiet defiance. 3 weeks later I gave birth to Liam in the Hilford Town Hospital. No private room, no fancy monitors, just me, a nurse named Carla, and the sound of my son's first breath. I named him Liam. It means strong-willed protector. Because that's what he would become. And what I would be for him. The first few weeks after Liam's birth were a blur of sleepless nights, bottle feedings, and the terrifying realization that no one was coming to help. There was no congratulatory card from my parents. No apology. No Leo at the door. Just the quiet hum of the radiator in Miss Lorraine's cottage, the scent of baby powder, and the sound of my son's gentle breathing beside me. I remember one night, maybe it was week 3, Liam had a fever. It was cold, too cold for a newborn to be out, but I had no car, no money for a cab, and the only nearby pharmacy was a mile away. I wrapped him in every scarf I owned, tucked him inside my coat, and walked through the snow, praying with every step that he'd be okay. I don't think I've ever been more scared. Not even the night I was kicked out of my parents' house. Because this time it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about him. This tiny life that had no one in the world but me. But we made it. And slowly we found our rhythm. Miss Lorraine helped me apply for a part-time assistant stipend at the local community college's art department. It wasn't much. Barely enough for groceries and diapers. But it gave me structure. She watched Liam while I worked mornings. I took online classes in the evenings, determined to finish my certification to teach. Some nights I painted until 2 a.m., eyes barely open, brush slipping from my fingers. But I never stopped. Because every time I looked at Liam, I was reminded why I couldn't afford to. By the time he was 2, we had a routine. I'd bike him to the town daycare every morning, then go teach art classes at the Hilford Community Art Center, an old brick building with paint-splattered floors and walls full of forgotten dreams. It was the same place Leo and I used to sketch murals on weekends in high school. Funny how life circles back like that. I taught the kids how to express their emotions through color. How red wasn't always angry and blue wasn't always sad. How sometimes you needed a bit of both to tell the whole story. And Liam, he was thriving. By age 3, he was drawing trees with twisted roots and dogs with soulful eyes. Not stick figures, not scribbles, but stories, real emotional stories. His drawings filled our apartment walls, overlapping with mine until you could hardly see the beige paint beneath them. I didn't know it at the time, but that art, those chaotic, colorful pages taped up like banners, would become the breadcrumbs that led my past right back to me. One day, while cleaning up after class, I found an envelope tucked under the supply shelf. I opened it curiously. Inside was a letter from the owner of a local cafe. "We noticed your students' artwork hanging in the community center. We'd love to feature some of your personal work on our walls for next month's art walk. Please let us know if interested. I must have read it 3 times. My heart pounding. It wasn't a gallery opening or a fancy Manhattan showcase, but it was real. It was someone seeing me. Not the runaway pregnant girl, not the embarrassment of the Whitmore name. But me, Megan. An artist. Teacher. A mother. That evening I told Liam while we were making dinner. He clapped, his eyes wide. Are you going to be famous now, Mommy? I laughed, tears pricking at the edges. No, baby. Just happy. But happiness has a strange way of stirring ghosts. A week later, I received a call from a number I hadn't seen in nearly 6 years. My hand froze when I saw the name. Chloe Whitmore. My sister. My heart thudded in my chest. I hadn't spoken to her since the night I was kicked out. She was 15 then, still under our parents' thumb, still too scared to go against them. But I remembered the way she looked at me through the upstairs window that night as I walked down the driveway carrying everything I owned. She didn't cry. She didn't wave. But she didn't look away either. I answered the call. Hi, Megan. It's me. Chloe. Her voice was softer than I remembered. But there was a tremble to it, like she was holding something back. I'm getting married next month, she said. And I want you to come. I didn't say anything at first. Just stared at the floor where Liam's crayons were scattered like fallen candy. I know it's a lot, she continued. But Mom and Dad, they've changed. Dad's health hasn't been great. I've been following your art online. I saw the cafe's post. Liam looks just like you did as a kid. I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest spreading like a bruise. You're calling just to invite me to a wedding? Asked, my voice thin. It's not just that, Chloe whispered. They want to see you. They know they were wrong. And they sent you something. The next day a letter arrived. Plain envelope. No return address. But I knew the handwriting instantly. My father's. Inside was a short note. Megan. This is a portion of the trust fund you were meant to receive. If you're willing, I'd like to see you again. Not to explain, not to argue. Just to listen. I hope you'll consider it. Richard Whitmore. Folded inside was a check. I stared at the amount, numb. It was more than I made in a year teaching. Enough to change our lives. But it didn't erase the nights I held Liam as he cried himself to sleep hungry. Or the nights I painted with bleeding fingers to make rent. That check couldn't buy the years they stole from me. Still, something in the letter made me pause. He had signed it with my name. Not daughter. Not Ms. Whitmore. Just Megan. That night, while washing dishes, Liam tugged at my shirt. Mommy. Do I have grandparents? I froze, the dish slipping slightly in my hand. I'd always known this question would come. But I never imagined how hard it would be to answer. Yes, I said softly. But they live far away. Can I meet them? I didn't answer right away. But as I tucked him into bed later that night, brushing his hair away from his forehead, I whispered, maybe soon. If the time is right. The truth is, I wasn't ready. But I wasn't running anymore either. The next morning I texted Chloe. Come. But I'm doing it for Liam. Not for them. And just like that, the door I thought had slammed shut forever creaked open. 3 days after I sent that message to Chloe, an elegant ivory envelope appeared in our mailbox. I almost didn't open it. My fingers hesitated over the seal as memories of rejection, silence, and the finality in my parents' voices the night they disowned me resurfaced like ink bleeding through paper. Inside was a formal wedding invitation, the kind my mother would have chosen. Embossed edges, intricate floral patterns, and the words Whitmore Rivers Union, in calligraphy so delicate it looked hand-lettered by angels. Tucked inside was a short note written in a trembling script I instantly recognized. Megan. No words can change the past. But I hope you'll give the present a chance, even if it's late. I've always wished to see my grandchild, even if just once. Amelia. The last line was slightly smudged, as if a drop of tea had fallen on it. Or maybe a tear. For a long time, I just sat there with the letter in my lap, the distant hum of the fridge the only sound in the room. That night, while brushing Liam's hair before bed, I told him, "Next weekend, I'm taking you somewhere special." He sat up, eyes bright. "Will there be cake?" I laughed. "Yes. And someone who used to be part of Mommy's family." He tilted his head, thoughtful. "As long as you're there, Mommy." I hugged him tighter than usual. There was a storm in my chest, but he grounded me, always had. For his sake, I would walk back into the lion's den. Not as the broken girl they cast aside, but as the woman who survived it. Granville Hall was every bit as extravagant as I remembered. White orchids framed the entrance. A string quartet played Vivaldi near a massive fountain where I once posed for family Christmas photos, smiling through clenched teeth in a velvet dress I hated. Liam clutched my hand tightly as we walked through the grand doors. He wore his little navy blazer and khakis, his idea of fancy clothes. He looked like a miniature gentleman, and I couldn't have been prouder. Inside, the air buzzed with chatter, clinking glasses, and the murmured gossip that always accompanied Whitmore events. Heads turned as we entered. I could feel the weight of their eyes. Curious, judgmental, confused. Megan Whitmore had returned. But not alone. With a child. Liam looked up at me, whispering, "Mommy, why is everyone staring?" I squeezed his hand and whispered back, "Because you're too handsome. You surprised them." He grinned. Just like that, my fear melted into a quiet strength. Then I saw her, Chloe, dressed in an elegant lace gown. Her hair swept up in soft curls. She looked radiant, older, calmer, and oddly emotional as she rushed toward me. "You came." Her voice broke as she pulled me into a tight hug. "I said I would." "Congratulations," I added, stepping back. "You look beautiful." She smiled through tears and turned to Liam. "Hi, Liam. I'm your Aunt Chloe." Liam gave a polite nod. "Hi." We were led to a table near the window, away from the main floor but not hidden. It was deliberate, my mother's subtle way of acknowledging us without inviting too much scrutiny. I didn't mind. Liam was happy, sketching with the colored pencils I brought in my purse, humming to himself as if we were in our kitchen instead of a ballroom. A man approached us after a while. Tall, salt and pepper hair, designer suit that screamed old money, but his eyes were kind. Chloe leaned in. "This is Mr. Gerald Monroe. He's an art critic for Canvas Weekly." I stood, polite but guarded. "Pleasure to meet you." Mr. Monroe glanced down at Liam's drawing, an autumn scene with a mother and child walking under a golden tree. He bent closer, studying it with genuine awe. "Did your son draw this?" "Yes," I replied. He nodded slowly. "There's emotional intelligence here. Depth. At his age, that's rare." I said nothing. Liam kept sketching, lost in his world. Mr. Monroe looked back at me. "Forgive me, but the name Whitmore. Any relation to the Whitmore Gallery?" Took a breath. "I'm Richard and Amelia Whitmore's daughter." The air between us shifted. His eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. "Ah, then it makes sense. The legacy lives on." His voice carried. "Too much." A few guests nearby turned, whispering. Then someone called out, "Is that Richard's grandson drawing over there?" Another voice. "I thought Megan had disappeared. She looks just like her mother did at that age." The room rippled with murmurs. And then silence. I turned and saw my parents across the room. My mother stiffened, her mouth a firm line. My father blinked slowly, as if seeing me and Liam, for the first time through a lens he couldn't control. Mr. Monroe raised his glass slightly and said, "Talent like this doesn't just happen. It's inherited. And nurtured." I stood, heart racing. This wasn't why I came. I didn't want this spectacle, this circus of attention. I reached for Liam's hand, ready to leave before it escalated. But then a voice stopped me. "Megan, wait." Turn. My father was walking toward me, slowly, as if each step cost him something. He looked older, grayer. His eyes didn't hold the same icy command they used to. Instead, they were pleading. Please don't go. He paused. Chloe was right. We were wrong. I was wrong. The room watched silent. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. Liam looked up at me, uncertain. Before I could answer, Chloe stepped forward. She stood beside me, looked out over the stunned crowd, and said, Everyone, today is my wedding day. A day for love, for truth. And I want to start my marriage the right way. With honesty. People shifted in their seats, unsure where this was going. My sister Megan, she said firmly, was cast out by our family. But she never stopped being part of mine. She's strong, brave, and the best mother I've ever seen. Chloe turned toward our parents. It's time we stopped pretending like nothing happened. My mother's face paled. Her hands clutched a napkin so tightly her knuckles turned white. She didn't just survive, Chloe continued. She thrived. She raised a beautiful child. She built a life from the ashes we left her in. And she's here today, not because we deserved it, but because she chose to be. Applause broke out. Not loud at first. A few hesitant claps. But it grew. Stronger. I felt Liam's grip on my hand tighten, and I looked down at him. Those big blue eyes filled with awe. For the first time in years I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone anymore. My father took another step forward. If I could go back, I would. I let fear and pride make me cruel. And I lost the best thing this family ever had. I met his gaze. I don't need apologies. I need change. He nodded solemn. Then let's begin. If you'll let us. Liam looked up at me. Mommy. Can Grandma and Grandpa come to art class with me? I glanced at my mother. Her face was wet with tears, real ones. If they're willing to learn, I whispered. She stepped forward, gently took Liam's hand and said, I'd love that. And for the first time in 6 years we stood together. Not as the perfect Whitmore family, but as people broken but trying. That day at the wedding was the first time I saw my parents as human. Not gods in ivory towers. Not tyrants safeguarding their social image. Just two aging people clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they hadn't lost me forever. But one apology doesn't fix 6 years of silence. The next few days passed quietly. No dramatic gestures. No parade of remorseful gifts. Just a few cautious messages from Chloe asking how I was feeling. And then, a week after the wedding, my phone rang again. It was my father. Megan, he said, voice low. Are you free this weekend? Pause. Why? I'd like to come see your class. If you'll have me. I stared at the wall. Sunlight casting shadows over Liam's artwork taped to it. My father, who once told me I was no longer his daughter, wanted to sit in a circle of finger-painted desks and watch me teach kindergartners how to blend primary colors into stories. Took a breath. Class starts at 9 a.m. Be on time. I will, he said. And I'll bring some of my old sketches. If that's okay. My heart didn't leap, but it stirred. The same way dry earth stirs at the first drop of rain. That Saturday, I arrived at the Hilford Community Arts Center early. I prepped Liam's favorite watercolor station and laid out extra brushes. He'd been up since 6, too excited to sleep. He even packed a small watercolor set, just for Grandpa. When the door creaked open at 8:55 a.m., Liam ran to it. There stood my father. He wore a simple pale blue shirt, sleeves rolled. No suit, no tie. Just a man carrying a worn leather bundle under his arm. His eyes scanned the classroom. The little aprons hung on hooks, the shelves of paint-stained jars, the drawings pinned along the wall under the banner Ms. Megan's art class. You designed all this? He asked softly. Every corner, every dollar, saved from part-time shifts and teaching gigs. It's beautiful, he said, and he meant it. He walked slowly past each easel, pausing at one of Liam's latest pieces, a snow-covered field with a child and dog curled together beneath a tree glowing with stars. He sees light where others wouldn't, he murmured. I never taught him that, I said. He just feels it. My father unwrapped his bundle and laid it gently on the back table. Sketches. Dozens of them. Some yellowed at the edges, others still sharp. They were stunning. Landscapes from when he was a teenager. Faces full of quiet sorrow. Dreams he never showed. This, I said, thumbing through them, is why I wanted to go to art school. He nodded. I was afraid you'd lose yourself in it like I did. No, you didn't lose yourself in art. You lost yourself when you stopped. He didn't argue, just stood quietly, like that truth had been waiting years to be spoken aloud. As weeks passed, my father began showing up more often. First just watching, then helping, mixing paints, showing the kids how to hold a brush. They started calling him the old art teacher, and Liam introduced him to his classmates like a prized secret. My grandpa can mix colors without a palette, he'd brag. My mother took longer. She didn't visit class, but every Wednesday afternoon she picked Liam up and took him to the park with a basket of snacks and coloring books. She told him made-up fairy tales about owls that studied painting and opened galleries in the woods. He believed every word. I stayed guarded, even as I watched her crouch in the grass beside him, helping him draw a purple dragon wearing glasses. I wanted to believe she meant it. That she wasn't pretending. That this wasn't another illusion for public image. But Liam didn't need proof. He just needed love. And if she gave him even a piece of what she withheld from me, I wouldn't stand in the way. Then something happened I never expected. One afternoon, Chloe called me from the gallery. Megan, she said, we're curating a special exhibit next month, The New Generation. I want you to showcase your students' work. I nearly dropped the phone. You mean their crayon whales and rainbow volcanoes? I mean their emotions, their stories, their truth. You don't just teach art, you teach courage. I laughed through the disbelief. Are you sure Mom and Dad are okay with this? They're not just okay. They insisted. I stood in silence for a moment, paintbrush in hand, watching Liam scribble across the table. Okay, I whispered. If it gives them a voice, I'll do it. Opening day was surreal. The Whitmore Gallery, once my personal house of exile, now displayed my students' artwork at eye level for children. Name tags, bright frames, even little about the artist, cards handwritten in wobbly letters. Parents, teachers, and strangers filed in, stopping to smile at a portrait of a turtle in space or a landscape with trees made of candy canes. Laughter echoed in rooms that once held hushed deals and highbrow critics. Gerald Monroe returned and stood before one of Liam's newest pieces, a mother and child on a riverboat at night, surrounded by glowing fireflies. It's not just talent, he said. It's the way you've nurtured it. Behind him, my father watched silently, his expression unreadable. Then he stepped closer and whispered, You were always the artist. We just didn't have the courage to see it. But the past wasn't done testing me. Later that afternoon, Chloe found me helping the kids rinse brushes. Megan, she said, breathless. There's someone here to see you. In the lobby. He says his name is David Black. My blood ran cold. David. The boy who once promised forever. Who vanished into the New York skyline 6 years ago and never looked back. I walked out, each step heavier than the last. And there he was. Hair slicked back, tailored coat, polished shoes. The same eyes I once loved, now hollow. Megan, he smiled. You look just as beautiful. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice flat. I saw the article about the exhibit. The photo of you and Liam. He's mine, isn't he? I said nothing. He stepped closer. I want to be part of his life now. Have a real job. Stable home. I want to do what's right. I let out a dry laugh. Right. 6 years late. I was young. Panicked. But I'm here now. No, I said, eyes narrowing. You're here because you saw his face in a magazine. Not because you love him. Because he makes you look good. Megan, I have rights. No. You don't. And then a voice behind me. You gave up those rights the moment you walked away. My father stepped forward, calm and steady. I'm Richard Whitmore. And I've had a lawyer on standby for 6 years in case this day ever came. David's face paled. If you take one more step, my father continued, I'll ensure your name is dragged through every media outlet in Vermont. Every document, every hospital record, every missed birthday. Gone. David clenched his fists but said nothing. Leave, I said, my voice cold as glass. And don't come back. He did. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Not in power but in shame. That night, as Liam snuggled beside me and asked, Mommy, who was that man? I whispered, just someone Mommy used to know. But he's not part of our story anymore. Good, Liam said. I like our story better. So did I. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't protecting him from the world. I was showing him how to conquer it, with truth, with strength, and with love. Winter in Hilford crept in like a whisper. Snow dusting the rooftops, fireplaces flickering behind frosted windows, and Christmas lights blinking gently on Main Street. Our apartment, though small, glowed with warmth. Liam had made decorations from colored paper and glitter, taping them haphazardly to the walls, turning our living room into a child's version of a winter wonderland. But even in the quiet comfort, I knew something had shifted since David's appearance at the gallery. He hadn't called, hadn't written. I suspected he'd realized he stood no chance, not against the paper trail I kept, or the witness statements I'd quietly gathered over the years. Miss Lorraine, hospital staff, even the last text he ever sent me. I can't do this. I need to focus on my future. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. What lingered instead was a new, unfamiliar stillness, a space opening where fear once lived, a space that could finally be filled with something else. Healing. That December, my father didn't miss a single Saturday class. He didn't make grand speeches or try to steal the spotlight. He just showed up. He helped the kids mix colors, sat beside Liam and quietly shared sketching techniques I remembered from my own childhood. Techniques he had once withheld from me, locked away in a vault of discipline and control. Now he was offering them freely, gently, like a man undoing his own knots. The children adored him. Even the shy ones giggled when he knelt to their level and told stories of color as though it were alive. Liam beamed with pride every time someone asked, "Is that your grandpa?" And my mother. She surprised me more than anyone. She still wore her pearls, still ironed her blouses crisp and straight. But she began visiting on Wednesdays. Never the classroom, just the park. She brought Liam apple pie and fairy tale books. I watched from a distance sometimes, peeking through the fence while she sat cross-legged on the grass beside him, pointing out shapes in the clouds. One afternoon, Liam came home holding a drawing of a castle in the sky. Grandma said it's where the Owl King lives, the one who teaches baby birds to paint with feathers dipped in dreams. I blinked stunned. The Amelia Whitmore I had known would never have spoken such whimsy. She didn't believe in dreams, only in results. Yet here she was learning to let go. I didn't know whether to trust it. But Liam didn't need caution. He just needed connection. And she, to my amazement, was giving it. Then came the invitation. Chloe called me while I was grading student sketches late one evening. "I'm speaking with the City Library Board," she said. "They're adding a new children's wing next spring. I nominated one of your paintings to hang in the reading nook. It's the one of Liam under the green umbrella." My breath caught. That painting had been personal. Done late one night after a storm, Liam asleep beside me on the couch, and the memory of that first year haunting my brushstrokes. "You really think they'd accept it?" "I know they will." A week later it was official. My work, my story, would hang in the very place where my son would one day borrow his first chapter book. Felt poetic, full circle. And yet, even as life blossomed in ways I never expected, the deepest part of me still struggled with forgiveness. Not with anger, that had burned out long ago, but with disappointment, the kind that settles in your bones when the people you loved the most proved they loved you conditionally. That Christmas Eve, We hosted dinner in our apartment. No gala. No gold leaf table settings. Just roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and the soft jazz of Nat King Cole playing from the old Bluetooth speaker. Chloe brought cranberry scones and terrible jokes. My mother brought Liam a red sweater she had knitted herself, something I hadn't realized she still knew how to do. My father brought a pecan pie and stayed to help do the dishes, quietly admiring the gallery wall Liam and I had filled with new art. There was no speech, no confrontation, just a calm I hadn't known since childhood. Liam pulled me aside at one point, holding my hand tightly. "Mommy, can I make a wish this year?" "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" "I don't want toys. I just want everyone to eat dinner together again next Christmas. Just like this." I knelt down and wrapped my arms around him. "Me too, baby. Me too." That night, after everyone left and Liam was tucked in, I stood by the window and watched the snow fall over Hilford. Streetlights cast golden halos on the blanket of white below. Our breath still lingered on the windowsill, where we'd pressed our noses earlier to look for Santa's sleigh. It had been 6 long years. 6 years of rebuilding. 6 years of rejection, fear, resolve, and growth. Now, in this quiet moment, I realized something profound. My story was never really about revenge. Not the loud kind, anyway. It was about reclaiming space, reclaiming voice, reclaiming dignity. I hadn't waited for an apology. I had built a life without it. And in doing so, I created something far more powerful than anger. As I turned off the living room lights, my eyes settled on a sketch pinned to the fridge. Liam had drawn our family, not the way it used to be but the way it was now. Me, him, Chloe, Grandma, Grandpa. All of us, holding hands, under a sky of red and blue swirls. His world wasn't perfect, but it was whole. And that was more than I ever thought we'd have. The year turned, and with it came a gentle thaw, not just of the snow coating Hilford's cobbled streets, but of things I'd long thought frozen for good. My relationship with my parents remained cautious, but no longer cold. They didn't try to reclaim authority, nor pretend that the past had never happened. Instead, they started asking real questions. My father once quietly asked, "Do you still keep your old sketchbooks?" And when I handed him one, tattered, pages curling with time, he sat with it for nearly an hour, tracing every pencil line like it was an apology written in graphite. My mother, still a mystery in many ways, had started texting me photos from her garden with questions like, "Would this lilac look good in a painting?" It wasn't deep conversation, but it was a language we could speak without old barbs and buried blame. Liam didn't care about any of that. He loved them simply, openly, because he had no reason not to. And maybe, in some small way, he taught them how to love without expectation in return. By spring, the city library was buzzing with renovations. Chloe sent me a photo of my painting, under the green umbrella, framed and hung in the children's wing above a beanbag corner. "Looks like it belongs," she texted. When I took Liam to see it, his face lit up. "That's us," he shouted proudly to a little girl sitting nearby. "Mommy painted me." We stayed for 2 hours that afternoon. He read picture books aloud, dramatically changing his voice for each character, while I sat quietly, hands resting over the warmth of my heart. No one there knew the backstory. No one knew how close I'd come to giving up. But the painting knew. It had carried every brushstroke of survival. And that, somehow, was enough. One sunny Thursday in April, the Whitmore Gallery reopened a long-shuttered room, an event Chloe spearheaded as part of her push to make the space more community-centered. She asked me to co-curate a small exhibit titled The Art of Childhood, featuring select works from my students. I agreed. Not because I sought validation, but because the gallery had once represented silence for me. And now I wanted it to hold voices. Bright, messy, unfiltered voices. Opening day was simple. Lemonade instead of champagne, crayon cookies instead of caviar. Children led their parents around, proudly pointing out their work. Liam stood next to one of his newest pieces, a watercolor of a kite flying free, its string held by a smiling woman with wild blonde hair. He didn't name it, but I knew what it meant. As people admired the student work, I wandered toward a back alcove where Chloe had installed a surprise piece. A shadow box of photos, sketch snippets, and quotes from the kids describing what art meant to them. One read, "Art is when I feel safe." Another, "Art is how I say stuff when I can't talk." And another, in Liam's scrawled handwriting, "Art is my mom's way of hugging." I swallowed hard. My father stood beside me, his voice quiet. "I didn't realize how much we missed by not letting you speak your truth." I looked at him. "You still raised me to be strong. That counts for something." He nodded, eyes misting. We didn't say more. We didn't need to. That night, after we cleaned up and locked the gallery, I took the long way home with Liam. Through the park, past the stone bridge, along the same path I used to walk alone as a teenager. Only now I wasn't alone. Liam skipped beside me, pointing out squirrels and asking if he could have 2 popsicles when we got home. We were crossing the bridge when he suddenly stopped and looked up. "Mommy, do you remember when I asked if I could meet my grandparents?" Smiled. "Of course. I'm glad we did. I think they're learning how to love people better now." That small, wise voice cracked something open in me. I knelt down beside him, brushing his hair back. "I think you're right," I whispered. "And you helped them do that." He nodded solemnly, then added, "But I still think Grandma needs to learn how to draw a dragon. Her last one looked like a potato." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. Then, just as we were heading back toward the main road, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Hello, Ms. Whitmore." "Yes. This is Sarah Penfield. I'm calling from the Vermont State Youth Arts Initiative. We've seen your work, specifically the children's exhibition at the Whitmore Gallery and your class's participation at the library. We're putting together a mentorship program for young artists across the state, and we'd like to invite you to lead it." Blink. "Me? Yes. We think you have something rare. Not just skill, but the ability to help others see their worth through art." I didn't know what to say. "Would you be willing to meet next week to discuss the details?" "Yes," I finally managed. "Yes, I'd be honored." When I hung up, Liam looked at me with that intuitive expression he always wore when something important was happening. "What is it, Mommy?" I scooped him into my arms. "It's a new door, sweetheart. One I never thought would open." He grinned. "Let's open all the doors." Back at the apartment, I stared at the email Sarah sent as a follow-up. The subject line read, "A place for your voice." 6 years ago, I was thrown out for having one. Now I was being invited to share it. I thought of Miss Lorraine. Of the night she let me sleep in her guest room without knowing whether I'd stay a week or a year. Of the chipped brass lamp on her desk, and the smell of cinnamon she baked into every kindness. She was the first door. And every one since had been one I chose to knock on myself. Now it was time to knock on doors for others. Not just to enter but to hold them open. Spring deepened into summer, and with it, the Vermont hills turned lush and green, humming with life. Our little apartment remained the same. Walls still plastered with Liam's evolving art, the kitchen forever smelling of coffee and crayon wax, but something inside me had shifted for good. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was growing. The mentorship program through the Vermont State Youth Arts Initiative took off faster than I imagined. I traveled on weekends to nearby towns, Maple Ridge, Braxton Hollow, even as far as Montpelier, to hold art workshops in school gyms and church basements. Kids came in shy, hands in their pockets, unsure of what they were allowed to feel. And then they painted. And it poured out of them. Rage, joy, fear, dreams. All of it splashed across canvas in reds and blues and fearless purples. They didn't need permission, they just needed someone to say, "It's okay to be seen." I told them what I had once needed to hear. That art didn't have to be perfect, just had to be real. Liam often came with me. He'd sit cross-legged in the corner, sketching his own worlds, sometimes helping the smaller kids hold their brushes. He had become my assistant in more ways than one. Quiet, patient, always watching. One day, after a workshop in a small town called Beckford, a mother approached me. "Are you Megan Whitmore?" "Yes," I said, unsure whether to brace for judgment or praise. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, eyes misty. "My son hasn't spoken more than a sentence at school all year. But today, he painted a self-portrait and wrote his name under it. He told me, as Megan said, I don't have to be scared to be myself." That night, back home, I cried. Not from sadness, but from the release of every memory that had once told me I was too soft, too emotional, too much. I was never too much. I was always just enough for the people who needed me. One evening in late July, I received an invitation to an art gala at the newly revitalized Whitmore Gallery. Not from my father. Not from Chloe. But from my mother. It was handwritten. "Megan, I can't change what I did. But I'm learning to see the world through Liam's eyes. Through yours. There's an empty wall in the gallery. I want it to belong to you. Will you consider it? Amelia." I stared at the letter, stunned. Not because she'd invited me, but because for the first time, it didn't feel like obligation or guilt. Felt like choice. Said yes. When the night of the gala arrived, I wore a simple navy blue dress, the same one I'd worn to Chloe's wedding. Liam wore the red sweater Grandma Amelia had knitted and insisted on styling his own hair with spikes. "You look like a star," I told him. "No," he grinned. "I look like your assistant." The gallery glowed that night. Soft lights, murmured laughter, and paintings. So many paintings from local youth, displayed with reverence usually reserved for priceless oil works. The empty wall stood near the back, a spotlight cast gently over it. Waiting. Carried the canvas myself. It wasn't my most technical work. Not my most daring. But it was mine. Titled Resilience, it depicted a woman standing on a hill in a thunderstorm, shielding a child beneath an umbrella stitched together from scraps of torn cloth, each piece representing a moment of rejection, abandonment, and hardship. But the child was smiling. Because in her mother's arms, he was untouched by the storm. As I mounted it, a hush fell over the room. My mother walked up beside me, her fingers trembling. "I remember when you used to draw on the backs of receipts. I always told you to stop wasting paper." I didn't laugh. I just looked at her. "I didn't understand," she said, her voice low. "That you weren't wasting anything. You were telling the truth before anyone gave you permission." Behind her, my father stood with a quiet pride. Chloe wiped away a tear. And Liam. He stood next to the plaque beside the painting. His name listed as collaborator, because I'd used one of his old drawings of a storm cloud in the final design. The crowd began to applaud. Not for the Whitmore name. Not for the gallery. But for what had finally filled that empty wall. Later that evening, while the guests sipped wine and drifted through exhibits, I sat on the back steps with Liam and my father. The night air was warm. Fireflies hovered in the hedges like tiny lanterns. My father pulled a worn notebook from his coat. "These were some of my last sketches before I gave up painting," he said. "I want you to have them." I opened the book slowly. Inside were dozens of pages. Portraits of me as a child, drawings of our old garden, sketches of my mother laughing, and one, unfinished, of a girl on a park bench alone, her head bowed over her hands. "I started that one the night after you left," he admitted. I traced the pencil lines, tears prickling at my eyes. I didn't finish it because I didn't know how the story ended. "I do," I said, closing the book gently. "It ended here." He looked at me. "Do you forgive me?" "I'm learning how," I said. "Every time you show up, it gets easier." We sat in silence after that, Liam leaning against me, content just to be. That was the moment I understood the full shape of my journey. It wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that no one, not rejection, not betrayal, not abandonment, gets to define my worth. I did that. And I did it through the quiet choices. Through every sleepless night, every lesson taught, every tear wiped from Liam's cheek. I had built a life of dignity without a silver spoon, without applause, without approval. But now I also had something more. A family that, though once broken, had chosen to piece itself back together. Not for reputation, but for love. Sometimes the people who break us are the ones we hope will help us heal. But true power lies in not needing their apology to move forward. Megan's story reminds us, your worth isn't defined by the family you're born into, but by the one you create, through courage, truth, and love. If Megan's journey moved you, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more powerful real-life stories that prove resilience is the greatest revenge.